Welcome to Political Direct Mail. What is the cost? What are the tools and the methods? How many different political mailers do I need to do? Is political direct mail different than standard direct mail? Allow me to answer the last question first. Number one, all political mail will or should be red tag. This presents to all the USPS locations that the mail is time sensitive. Two, those of us in politics will or should use DDU destination mail. This will save a whole lot of money to the campaign. Get your blanket, cup of hot chocolate, curl up on the couch, and get ready to take a nap. Well, unless of course you like this kind of stuff. I'll approach this episode by breaking it into 4 sections. Number 1, political mail history. Number 2, an impact of direct mail. And number 3, elements of direct mail. And finally, number 4, political mail process. Now let's begin with number 1, political history. Because of the cost of postage has gone very high over these past several decades, in 1981, 18 cents, in 2001, 34 cents, and in 2003, 63 cents. And I'm not even mentioning the current cost to mail a flat, which is about $1.35. Because of this near doubling every 20 years, it's far more important to use the best mailing techniques possible. California, from the 1970s to the 2000s, had a very robust structure within the USPS system. I wasn't born until 1960, and my career in politics did not start until the 1980s. But in my day, there was a substantial number of BMUs, SCFs, and DDUs that were all servicing the mail promptly and efficiently. During this time, the process was relatively easy, the costs were manageable. And in politics, the 1980s brought with it a need to become more efficient. This was established by hiring computer programmers, like my business, to begin diminishing the universes of a district. In other words, instead of mailing to 20,000 voters, a pattern of identification began, as well as a standard process of householding every voter. For example, targets might diminish the universe by identifying voter propensity or probability, political parties, voters in specific districts, genders, age, ethnicity of voters, or combination thereof. And this is just to name a few. The negatives to this was that every voter in a district was not communicated with. Some voters were left out. Of course, this was due to the rising costs, and campaigns couldn't afford to communicate with everyone. Now, this was and is hard on me personally because basically it meant that due to the lower probability levels for those lower socioeconomic voters, well, they were left out of any efforts. When I manage a campaign, I expand my persuasion efforts flavored by the candidate's profile. Not a cure to my woes, but it does help. By the time we hit the 2000s, USPS began to reduce the size of their operations nationwide. This made the whole system take longer and cost more to mail. As the USPS began to close or consolidate some of their facilities and also began to raise their postal rates, mail house companies like mine had to be creative and offered to do more of the work for the USPS. And with my printing, programming, and data processing service, I was able to offer a great deal in this area of efficiency. By the early 2000s, social media and the internet, and we began to glimpse of a little bit of the future. Then by 2020, the pandemic hit with a 200 to 300% increase in the printing cost. Change was clearly present and accounted for.
Maybe it's time for a change.
This has given you a little of where we were, where we are, and possibly where we're heading. Now for number 2, purpose and impact of direct mail. The purpose is basic. You want to win. Is mail an option for you? Hopefully you have watched my episode on marketing, and not everyone, especially those that are not well-funded, can do mail. But it is, in my opinion, based on time, the most effective and trackable form of getting your name and your message out there. On political direct mail, I was led to believe, or I was taught many years ago, that the mailer could change the direction of a candidate by 1% for each mailer. Let me give you an example of this logic. You're running against candidate B. you did a poll and you and Canada B are neck and neck at 50% each. Now let's say you do 10 mailers and Canada B does 4 mailers. On election day, you will win by 12% or a margin of 56 to 44. There are other factors involved, but essentially, this has been a good base rule in politics. Well, at least since my work began. Back in my day, many consultants would want to do 10 pieces of mail to guarantee a win. Most of these numbers have changed, and the average number of fundable mailers is now around 6 or 7, and that reduction is mainly due to the rising costs. Now, this 6 or 7 in combination with other new and upcoming venues usually works very well. Through a good targeting, creative design, multi-tier and gimmick mailings, your numbers can be even stronger. Elements of direct mail. From a base level, it's easy to say, all you need is design, print, and mail. Not. What is missing here is a voter count, the postal targets, followed by the phases of communications, the strategy of a mailer, the 3 basic postal rate levels, color, slogan, theme, and of course data. So allow me to try and dissect this, shall we? Today, voter targets are much more capable than a decade ago. Typically, what I do is I investigate the voter file, then I would determine the probability or likeliness of that voter. Then I identify those that are persuadable to vote based upon the candidate's profile. Now, once I have this base structure, I can break out the voters into multi-tiered targets or just one large target. Again, let's say your district has 20,000 voters. So typically I perform my first scrub 1. I usually drop all of what we term as dead weight first, which usually are the voters who have not voted in the last 4 elections, new registrants being the exception, non-deliverable houses, and out-of-district houses. I can do this programmatically using algorithms, so we're now at about 18 or 19,000 voters. Now comes the magic. Those of us that are licensed or permitted with the United States Postal Service use special software to achieve the best or most affordable rate level. And again, doing this as much of the preparation of work for the USPS themselves as possible. And I do a lot. I tell you that often I go from the design to the printer to the USPS entry point. Political mail is somewhat a specialized area, and I've noticed that many mail houses do not go above and beyond like I do. If you wish to know more, send me a message or schedule an appointment and I'll do my best to answer your questions. But after that, I perform what I call Scrub 2, which consists of householding, NCOAing, CASing, and DDU volume reports. Usually by the time I'm done processing all that mail, I end up with a household of 7,000 to 8,000, and I can get postal rates at 60% discount or more. Yep, that would be a postage rate of 22 to 26 cents, and that is for a flat piece, which is the first class mailing rate is currently $1.34. Let me be clear here. The costs associated with doing this type of work will cost a bit, but usually by only a few pennies. Regardless, the postal cost is still a major factor in doing a mailer, but still lower than the current printing cost. So now let's get right into it. Number 1, design. Design costs will probably vary, but my fees can run from $350 to $500. Number 2, printing. This cost can vary from 20 cents to 40 cents per piece. Number 3, mail house work. This generally comes to 4 cents to process, plus a little extra for custom work that's required. And number 4, mail data. Well, Leading Edge, my company, averages about 2 cents per data label. Other companies will charge different, and my minimum charge is $225. Political mail process. Political mail should be managed by professionals. Bummer, I know. The purpose involves special licenses or permits, political targeting experience, data sources, programming USPS process rules and regulations, communications experience, graphic arts experience, and finally, various compliance requirements. My average price for a cradle to grave costs hover around $55 to $1 for each mailer. There are a ton of variables. Therefore, it could cost less or even higher. Additionally, I can get close to pinpointing the actual day the voter will receive their mail. So the average estimate of $55 to $1 is inclusive of, I'm going to use my hand, data, design, mail house work, special USPS targeting processes, postage, and printing. The time to do this from start to finish could be from 10 to 14 working days to get to the voters' houses. But usually it takes longer when planning's not applied. When it's applied, I can be so much more shorter in time. What I advise my clients is to use a backwards timetable to calculate your timing. So 1, you need to determine the day you want the voters to get their mail. 2, you need 7 days backwards for the USPS to deliver to the house. 3, then you use 3 to 4 days back for the print mailing process and dropping at the post office. Finally, 1 to 3 days for design. Once the invoice is paid, it could take 13 to 14 days to get to the voters' houses. Keep it in mind the factors may apply that will cause delays. Most notably is the mistake of trying to count Saturday and Sunday as part of your planning. They're not counted. The post office doesn't work on those days except for Saturday, but most printers won't, which sometimes I do. I do have an expedited process where I could be as fast as 4 days, and we could have a strong control as to the day it is received by the voter. Again, this can only be achieved if the size of the mailer is manageable with the proper planning. So use these elements for your budget development and your project timelines. It will serve you well. While you're still asleep, reach over and hit that subscribe, like, and notifications button. Also, please feel free to buy me a cup of coffee. Link is below. And by the way, I'll be adding 2 more episodes. Episode 13 will be campaign tools and supplies. And episode 14 will be running your campaign conclusion. So thanks for joining me. See you in the next episode 11 of Field Campaign. A su servicio, which means at your service, Chef Cervantes.